We're in Parshat Terumah, and I guess the third major unit or theme of Sefer Shmot is we're now introduced to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle. And I wanted to talk tonight. I think I've shared this idea previously, but I wanted to dive in. One of the things that I love to do, I hope you find it as enjoyable as I do, is to kind of develop some of the midrashic traditions that Rashi might introduce us to. But oftentimes, if you dive a little deeper, you'll find fascinating connections. And then I wanted to kind of turn it all around upside down on its head at the end and see what you think about that.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds yummy.
So with that introduction, let me get the source sheet up and we'll get started.
You mean the source book?
The source book. Yeah, the last couple pages, I'm not sure we're going to look at too closely. All right, can you see that?
Not yet.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Can you make it a little bigger?
I can.
Yeah, you can.
All right. So at the very beginning of the Parsha, we have the beautiful introduction. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, Daber o bnei Israel, v'yikchu li truma me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo tikchu et trumati. Speak to the children of Israel, and they shall bring for me a truma, a dedication. Every person whose heart so moves him should bring for me a dedication. Zota truma asher tikchu me'itam. And this is the donations, the materials that you should gather from them. Zahav v'chesef unechoshet, gold and silver and copper. Utechelet v'argaman v'tolat shani v'sheish v'yuzim. And different types of bush purple and crimson yards, fine linen, goat's hair, orot elim ma'adamim, orot tichashim, Atzei Shitim, skins of tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia woods. Shemen lamaor b'samim l'shemen hamishcha v'liktor tasamim. And there should be oil both for providing light and for the incense. Avnei shoham v'avnei miluim la'ifod v'lachoshen, and precious stones for the ephod and for the breastplate. Now, we could dive into all of these different materials and discuss the origins, right? The most interesting one, perhaps, is the dolphin skins. Or however that should be translated, but where on earth did they get dolphin skins in the middle of the desert from is a question I've yet to find a satisfactory answer to. Maybe next year we'll investigate that a little bit more. But what I wanted to look at tonight is the origin of this Atzei Shitim, the acacia wood. So acacia is a pretty common wood. It's still used nowadays. But Rashi brings us to this fascinating midrashic tradition. And it's in two separate places that Rashi alludes to this. The first is on our pasuk, Atzei Shitim. Me'ayin hayu lahem bamidbar. Where did they get this acacia wood from in the desert? Piresh Rabbi Tanchuma, Yaakov Avinu tzafa beruach hakodesh shatidin Yisrael livnot mishkan bamidbar, v'hevi avazim lemitzrayim unita'am. Yaakov, Jacob, had prophecy that in the future his descendants would be told to build a mishkan, to construct a tabernacle. And he brought these trees to Egypt. When he went down to Egypt to reunite with Joseph, he brought the trees with him. And he planted them there. He commanded his children that they should bring these trees with them when they left Egypt. Okay, so it's a beautiful, right? We'll see the medrash in a second. But just think about what this is telling us. On the one hand, it's telling us that Yaakov had this foresight to right, he was never told by God, you need to provide materials for the Mishkan. He was just told that they were going to be commanded to build a Mishkan, and presumably he wants to have a piece in it. He wants to help in its construction, right? Very similar perhaps to what we find with David HaMelech, who so desperately wanted to be the one to build the Beis HaMikdash, but he was told that he's not allowed to because he was a soldier who had blood on his hands, and the Beis HaMikdash had to be built by someone who was clean, who was free of bloodshed. So David did whatever he could to assist his son Solomon in the ultimate construction of the Mishkan. So it seems like on the one hand we have that idea from Yaakov, that he wanted some part in the Mishkan, even though he wasn't directly told that he had to have a part in it, and even though he knew it was going to be many years after he was gone. The second curious thing here is it's nice that Yaakov planted these trees and told them, okay, I want you to bring the trees with you, the wood with you from these trees when you leave Egypt. But how did they leave Egypt?
In the middle of the night.
It was in the middle of the night. They were being chased out. They were being rushed. They didn't have time to bake their bread. You think that they had time to cut down these trees and to figure out the logistics of carrying the trees along with all their possessions through the desert? It's a beautiful thought, but the logistics seem to fall short a little bit of what's plausible. But anyway, that's just an introduction to this idea in the Medrash. The second time Rashi quotes it is further on in our parsha, when it says about there were different pieces of the Mishkan that were constructed with this Atzei Shitim, with the acacia wood. One of them being the planks, right? The Mishkan was a big tent, a big wooden structure with some sort of cloth or skins draped over it. And so the planks for the body of the Mishkan was made of this wood. And the Torah tells us, Asita et hakrashim la Mishkan Atzei Shitim amudim. You should make the planks for the tabernacle of acacia wood upright. Rashi here quotes the Medrash. It says, Hayalo lomar asita krashim. It should have said, you should make planks, because that's the way in which every other item is listed, without the definitive article, without the in front of it. Why here are the planks singled out?
That's clever.
Mahu hakrashim, me'at otan ha'umdin u'miyuchadim lekach, means that you should make the planks from the wood that has already been designated for this purpose. Yaakov Avinu nata arazim b'Mitzrayim u'kshamei tziva levanav la'alotam imahem k'sheyitzu miMitzrayim. And he again quotes from the same midrash we saw that Yaakov planted the trees in Egypt. When he died, he commanded his descendants to bring them out with them when they leave Egypt. Amar lahem sha'atira kadosh baruch hu litzavoto tan lasot mishkan b'midbar me'atzei shitim. He told them that in the future God will command them to make a mishkan out of this wood. Ra'u sheyu mizuanim biyadchem. And so therefore you should see to it that it is ready and you're prepared for this assignment when God tells you. Okay, so twice Rashi quotes this midrashic tradition, and now let's look at the Medrash inside. It appears in a few different places. So as we read it, remember, we're trying to delve deeper into this tradition. So be very sensitive to what's the same and what's different in the various accounts that the Medrash brings in describing this this tradition, this idea that the acacia wood came from Yaakov. So we're going to start with the Medrash Tanchuma. Okay. It starts by talking about those mysterious dolphin skins or whatever skins it was, and says it was from some miracle. says, and the krashim, the acacia wood, also came about by some sort of miracle. We're picking up in the English where I just highlighted. And I'll read in the Hebrew. It's a few lines down, 4 lines down in the Hebrew. Mehechan hayu hakrashim. From whence did the planks come? Yaakov Avinu nata otam b'sha'a she'yarad lemitzrayim. Yaakov planted them when he came down from Egypt. Amar levanav banai atidim atem lehi ga'el. He told his children, in the future you will be redeemed. Mikan, lehi ga'el mikan, you'll be redeemed from here. V'akadosh baruch hu atid lomar lachem misha'atem nigalin shetasu lo et hamishkan. And when you are redeemed, God will command you to build a mishkan. Ela amdu v'nitu arazim me'achshav. So therefore, you should plant the trees from now, from this point. So that when God gives you the commandments, they'll be ready for you. So immediately they planted the trees. So a little different from what Rashi told us. Who plants the trees here in the Medrash?
This is Jacob.
At the beginning it does, but then in the story it seems that it's really his children who planted.
Yeah.
He brought them down and they planted them. Right? Make sure it's ready. Miyad amdu v'natu v'asu kain. Immediately they stood up and they planted the trees. Amru rabotenu zichronam livracha. Our sages of blessed memory said, Habriach hatachton b'toch hakrashim, right? The central board was much larger than the other ones. Yarad biyad Yaakov avinu lemitzrayim. So this huge board Yaakov brought down with him to Egypt. Because it was very difficult to construct or to fabricate a board of such length. Not only that, but these trees that were planted by Yaakov's behest to his children, they sang a song before God. What song did they sing? Shene'emar az yiranenu Atzei hayar milifnei Hashem. Where we say in Kabbalat Shabbat, then the trees of the forest will sing before God. Ve'ein az el ashira, and the word az refers to song, as we see in Az Yashir. Ume'ematai, when did they sing the song to God? Kishena'aseh mehen hamishkan, when the tabernacle was made from them. So it's a beautiful medrash, right? And it does what we would expect the medrash to do, to tie together all these pieces and to give some personality perhaps to the wood, that they not only were designated by Yaakov, but when they finally were able to realize their purpose, they sang song praising God. And of course, right, we therefore should sing song praising God as well. Any other thoughts or reactions to this first medrash?
Daniel Goldman was at our house recently, and he told us about Acaccia wood. And one of the things he mentioned was the great beauty of the patterning in the heart of the wood. And it is cut in a special way to bring it out. And I was thinking that kind of jibes with the description of the dolphin or whatever the animal is. I've always thought of it as that other opinion, that it might be a kind of antelope or something like that. But it was known for the design and the multiple colors, but also the swirl of it. So that just struck me, the two of them together. Yeah, I thought that was very beautiful. But the other thing is, I just looked it up, online, and because he just said some other things about it too. But one of them is that it grows very rapidly. So for his children to be planting it, or for the children of the children to be planting it, all of that makes sense in that context to me. That whoever planted them, they were ready to go when they were ready to go. It could have been at any point. that it was done, and they grow 10 feet in 5 years or
Oh,
something
wow.
like that. I mean, just
Wow.
huge trees. They're very big. And the other thing is they're bendable. Oh, that was what Daniel said. They're bendable.
Mhm.
And once they are bent, when they dry, they are harder. They're 50% harder than oak. So it's a very special wood. I just wanted to bring that out a little bit.
Cool. Cool. We'll have to get Daniel to come. Maybe he can help us build a model Mishkan.
Yeah.
Oh, he
Put him to
Yeah.
work.
I can't reconcile this with the Yitzhak from Egypt. They left in a hurry.
Yeah.
They were told to go. They grabbed things. They were in such a hurry they couldn't even bake bread. And here it suggested that one of the essential things was to grab these trees and take them with them. And when the waters parted, presumably they dragged these trees through the dry bed of the sea. And in any case, surely the time frame at that stage, unless it is taken into account that there was prophecy which suggested that they would eventually be in the desert for 40 years. But originally, the plan was not that they would be in the desert for 40 years. So it would be a fairly short journey, I would have thought, to go from Egypt to Israel. When Yaakov and his family went down to Egypt, it was a matter of probably weeks or months. But there wasn't a question of it being for years.
It's a great question, Lou. I have the exact same question, as we'll see. Even Ezra asked the very same question. So you're in good company, Baruch Shekivanta.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we'll keep that question in the back of our mind. I wanna go through the developments in the rest of the Medrash, and then we'll come back to that, because I promise you, even Ezra's in here, and we'll get to him, even if we don't get to everything in the source pack tonight. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So the second appearance of this tradition is commenting on a different place in Chumash at the end of Sefer Shmot, when we're going through the recap of everything that was brought in the construction of the Mishkan. The Torah told us, "V'chol ish asher nimtza ito techelet v'argaman v'shalat shani v'sheish v'izim v'rot elim adamim v'rot techashim heviyu." Every person who had in their possession any of the yarn or the silks or the skins that was required, kol mirim chumat kesef u'nechoshet heviyu chumat Hashem v'chol asher nimtza ito atzei shitim l'chol melachet avodah heviyu. Anyone who had silver or copper, bring it as a dedication to God, and anyone who had in their possession this acacia wood brought it to make the Mishkan. So the Medrash here says, in the name of Rav Tavyumi, of Rabbi Tabyomi, B'sha'ah she'higia zmano shel Yaakov Avinu lipater min ha'olam, kara levanav, amar lahem heyu yodim she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu atil lomar livneichem lasot Mishkan. When Yaakov was about to die, he called his sons in, and he told them, you should know that in the future, God is going to command your descendants to build a Mishkan, to build a tabernacle. All the materials for it should be prepared by you. Shene'emar, Vaya Elokim imachem. He says to them, as part of his bracha, that God will be with you. V'chita ale al datcha k'shaya Yaakov Avinu chai, lo haya HaKadosh Baruch Hu im banav. Now, what does it mean that he says to them, God will be with you? Do you really think that God was not with them while Yaakov was still around? Ela kach amar lahem. But rather, this is how we should understand it. Atidu lomar lachem asuli mikdash. In the future, God will say to you, make for me a mikdash, a sanctuary. And he's going to descend and have his presence manifest amongst you. As it says, they will make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. So some of them hearkened to Yaakov's words, and some of them forgot about it. Yesh mehem sheheviu me'atzman, v'yesh mehem shelo heviu ela mima shaya munach biyado. When Moshe came and gave the command, there were some who brought of their own, and there were some who brought only what was lying around. Shekenu omer b'chol ish asher nimtza ito. That's why it says every person who was found in his possession brought whatever they had. So what's different in this account than what we saw previously?
They knew to be ready. So this raises the problem of doing everything at the last minute. I mean, they had a whole month from the last plague before this other one to get ready to go.
Okay,
And
yes, but also not everyone listened to Yaakov in this version.
all, but they would have had to cut them in parts and give them and distribute them in order to transport them anyway.
Right, but even more fundamental is some of them listened to Yaakov and some of them forgot all about it. Right, not everyone listened to Yaakov, and when does Yaakov tell them about it in this accounting?
On his deathbed.
On his deathbed. It wasn't that he came and actively participated or told them to plant it as soon as they got down as kind of some sort of promise that they're gonna eventually leave. It was after they were in Egypt for many years that he told them about this. So just some subtle differences that might make a big difference. It goes one step further though. Okay, I want to just take this one step further because I think that the upshot is quite remarkable. As Yaakov is heading down to Egypt to reunite with Yosef, the Torah tells us that he takes a detour, which is surprising because you would think after all the years of separation, he would want to get down to see Yosef as quickly as possible. But the Torah tells us in source number 8, Vayasa Yaakov b'chol asher lo, Vayavo be'er Sheva, Vayizbach zvachim elokei avi Yitzchak. Yaakov took all of his household, and he went to Be'er Sheva, and there he offered sacrifices to God. Okay, Be'er Sheva's in the south. It might have been on his way down to Egypt, but he stopped on the way in order to offer sacrifices, right? Be'er Sheva might have been seen as the southern border of Eretz Canaan, or of the Promised Land as Yaakov envisioned it. That might be why he specifically offered the sacrifices there. But the Medrash tells us, a different Medrash tells us something which I think is remarkable. The Medrash in source number 9, and when I need to scroll down in the English, someone please tell me. Lehechan halach. So the Medrash wants to know, where exactly did he go? Amar Rav Nachman shahalach lakotz arazim shenata Avraham zikno bive'er Sheva. He went to take the trees that Abraham had planted in Be'er Sheva. What trees did Abraham plant in Be'er Sheva?
Yeah.
I don't know that we really know.
It says tamarisk.
I know.
Yeah.
What.
Down in source number 11. Vayita eshel b'Be'er Sheva v'yikra sham b'shem Hashem el olam. Abraham plants an eshel in Be'er Sheva. We'll come back to that in a moment. A tamarisk or a tree of some sort. And there he invoked the name of God. So the same trees that Yaakov brought to Egypt, where did these trees come from?
Avraham
Avraham.
Avinu.
From Avraham Avinu. Just one more really interesting thing. If you go to number 10, again, all these midrashim, there's usually many different versions. In the version in number 10, the same tradition is brought that Yaakov brought the trees from Be'er Sheva that Avram had planted. But look who the rabbi is who tells us about it in source number 10. Amar Rav Tavyomi, the same guy who told us about Yaakov earlier with the tradition that he brought the trees, that he planted the trees to tell his descendants to plant them in order to build a Mishkan. It's that same rabbi who connects the trees back to Avraham Avinu. Okay, one more step. What's the significance of the eshel? What is the eshel that Avraham planted? What is it? I think we gave a shir on this once.
Some people translate it as an inn or place for people to stay, I believe. But
Okay.
it's always an acronym. some
Okay,
say.
so good. So some people say it's an inn. And that's Rashi quotes both those both those opinions in number 12.
Oh,
Ravu Shmuel Chadamar Pardes Lahavimi Menu Peirot. So Rav and Shmuel have different opinions on what it is. One says it was an orchard from which he would bring fruits to feed people, and one say it was a pundak, an inn la'achsanya, in order to host people, which had in it many different types of fruits. Just quickly, the Rashbam. Vayita Eshel Pardes Haya Lihitpalel Sham. It was an orchard for davening. It was like the meditation room in the airport. Right, the first or on the New York Thruway in the summer, they designate rest stops as mincha areas, so people won't daven on the side of the road. So maybe Abraham was the first meditation room, or the first airport chapel, or the first mincha rest area. He planted this for as a place for people to pray. The Radak tells us that Anne referenced earlier. He tells us that it stands for Ochel Shtia Ulevia. That the word Eshel, the aleph, stands for food, Shin stands for Shtia, for drink, and Lamed stands for Levia, for escort. That these are the three things that Abraham would provide for all of his guests, or all the passers-by. He would provide them food, drink, and he would provide them security or company on the road. So to me, this is a remarkable chain of connectivity, because we're told that the wood built used in the construction of our Mishkan comes from Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov had this divine prophecy that his children are going to be told to build a Mishkan, and he wants to be involved in that mitzvah somehow. He wants to have a piece in it, and he wants to ensure that that they'll be ready when the command comes, that they won't have to spend any extra time looking around for any materials or anything like that. But the very same wood that Yaakov brings to ensure that they'll be able to build it is the wood that Avraham had already planted. And embodied in that wood are these values of Avraham Avinu: the value of providing food and shelter for guests, the value of prayer, the value of providing security. And that is what goes into our Mishkan. What is the Mishkan? What's this wood being built for?
Prayer.
For our shul, right? Our shuls are the direct descendants of the Mishkan. The Mishkan was the predecessor of the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash is the predecessor of all of our shuls. So when we think about what our shuls are meant to embody, they're meant to embody the very material that goes into building it. The wood from Avraham Avinu, the wood that represents the hospitality, the caring for guests, that so much embodied who Avraham was. And I just thought that was a beautiful
That's lovely.
connecting point. If anyone is interested, I wrote this up a while ago in the Jewish Times, and I'm going to put the link in the chat right now if I can find the chat button. Okay, so that's idea number one as far as the acacia wood, as far as the origin of this Atzei Shitim, this acacia wood. And now I want to go back to Lou's question. Okay, it's not only Lou's question. I think we're all a little bit troubled by it's a beautiful idea, but how does this all work with the logistics of what we know about the Exodus from Egypt? And we can think of answers, but the Ibn Ezra raises the question in source number 15. Atzei Shitim. So we're back to our original pasuk, right? That one of the materials listed in the construction of the Mishkan is this Atzei Shitim, this acacia wood. Yesh mikadmonenu she'amru sheYaakov Avinu natzam b'Yisrael hotiam mitzrayim mitzvat Moshe. There are those of our predecessors or our ancestors who say that Yaakov planted these trees and the Jewish people took them out from Egypt at Moshe's behest. Araya v'chol asher nimtza ito, and they quote a pasuk, everything that was every person who had available to him, who happened to have. Kmo ha'techelet v'argaman, right? Just like some of them had techelet, some of them had purple linen, some of them had acacia wood, because they listened to Yaakov, or they were tied into this. V'yesh li tmoa, lama ne'emar asher nimtza ito litzarcho, right? So he says that textual proof doesn't make great sense, because it says everyone who had with him, implying they brought it with them because they had a personal use for it. But if they brought it because Yaakov told them, then it wouldn't make sense to say every person who had among their possessions. Says he doesn't think that makes great sense. V'od, kinei hamitzrim choshvim ki lizboachem holchim v'achar kach yashuvu. And furthermore, even at the very end, Paro and the Egyptians were still under the impression that the Jews were going to worship God for 3 days, right? They didn't necessarily think that the Jews were leaving permanently. So how can you justify chopping down all these trees and bringing all this wood for a 3-day journey when you're going to come right back? The Alkin Hashilum ve'ech yotziu krashim rabim. And so if that's the case, how could they bring out these huge planks of wood? Kol echad mehem eser amot, gam brichim ve'im avru al mitzrayim et makom hamelucha, right? We know the measurements were very big, and how could they pass it by the Egyptians without raising questions? And what would they respond to the Egyptians who asks them about why they're bringing all this wood? Okay. V'hine lo yad'anu im kabbalah hayta hi biyad avotenu shemimitzrayim hotzium gam anachnu nasor al mashma'atam. So the Ibn Ezra says, I have a lot of questions. He says, I'm not sure. If we really have this ancient oral tradition that our predecessors, our ancestors have, that the wood came from Egypt, so we'll buy into it. We'll accept that argument. V'im svarahi yesh levakesh derech acheret. But if all these midrashim that we just saw were trying to logically fill in the blanks about where on earth the Jews would have gotten this wood from, so we're going to offer our own rational explanation for it, says the Ibn Ezra. V'nomar ki haya samuch el har Sinai ya'ar Atzei Shitim. And we'll say much more simply that next to Mount Sinai, there was a forest of this wood, and that's where they got it from. Not that they schlepped it out from Egypt, not that Yaakov told them, not that there's this beautiful connection back to Avraham Avinu, but that they found it in their wanders in the desert. When they came to Har Sinai, they were going to stay there for a long time to get the Torah, and they didn't necessarily have the same cover that they had previously. Right, so therefore they had to build for themselves places to live, and that's where the wood came from. And therefore they had the wood when Moshe gave the command to build the Mishkan. So the Ibn Ezra is offering a really interesting approach to all this. Right? Although he doesn't reject the Midrashim, but he doesn't embrace the Midrashim either. He kind of splits the middle, right? He says, all right, if it really is an ancient tradition, I'm not one to reject the tradition. But if what this Medrash is trying to fill in the blanks, I'm going to offer my own more rational explanation. And we see that this is an approach he has elsewhere as well. In source number 17, no, this isn't the one. Okay, he quotes the same idea in source number 17 about in reference to the wood. I think elsewhere he says it about a different midrashic tradition as well. And so we have this much more rationalistic approach. I know that one of the things that sometimes is very challenging, these midrashim have beautiful ideas, but sometimes they just seem very hard to stomach. And so the Ibn Ezra is offering a much more rational approach to it. I think I mentioned previously, my friend David Kasher, who was in yeshiva with me, recently published a book. It's called Parsha Nuts, but it's a play on Parsha Nut. Very, very clever. And he goes into this approach of the Ibn Ezra in source number 18. And by the way, this is a really good book from Rabbi Kasher for those who are looking for resources on how to both approach classic commentators, but also, as far as like material for Divrei Torah, it's he really does an excellent job of getting at the heart of what the various commentators are saying and giving very nice lessons on it. So he says that this gives us insight into the Ibn Ezra's theory of how we should be interpreting the Bible. When we look at these stories in the Bible, do we read them as they have been traditionally understood, or do we look at them afresh and try to make sense of them ourselves? Well, that depends. The tradition is always a starting point, and if it seems to be very well established, perhaps even an unbroken link to the original tellers of the story, then we accept it. But if we believe that the tradition we have been handed down is in itself a record of our ancestors struggling to figure out how to make sense of the story, then we too are entitled to engage in that struggle and come up with our own, perhaps unique understanding. And then he takes it a step further. This is a tension that exists with religion in general. We are always weighing the authority of tradition against the need for innovation and creativity. We expect religion to preserve the wisdom of the past, the sacred stories and rituals we have inherited from ancient times. We also know that a religion that cannot evolve to meet the needs and insights of the future will lose its vitality and relevance. Religion must always be looking backwards and forwards for answers. Remarkably, that is just where Rashi and Ibn Ezra, respectively, have found their answers to the question at hand about the acacia wood. Where did the children of Israel get the wood from the tabernacle? Rashi says they brought it with them from Egypt, and before that from their homeland. They carried it with them because they had a tradition that linked them back to their forefather Jacob. The Ibn Ezra says that they discovered a new forest in the midst of the journey forward. They found what they needed along the way. Indeed, these trees awaited them at the foot of Mount Sinai, the place of new revelation. And of course, though it cannot logically be so, both Rashi and the Ibn Ezra are right. For this wood will be used to construct the tabernacle, the structure which dares to contain the presence of God. How is such a thing possible? How do we encounter the intangible, ineffable, mysterious God in this physical time and space? Do we rely on the wisdom of our sacred traditions, or do we seek out new forms of revelation and discovery? We must have both. We will need the strength of the past and the resilience of the future if this structure is to hold. This wood must bend, but it cannot break. So I thought this was a really beautiful bringing together of these two different approaches. I think that what the Medrash, and when we really dive into some of these Midrashic traditions, have to offer, the connection of Avraham Avinu, bringing that into our modern day shuls, is quite a beautiful lesson. It's quite inspirational, and I think is true. There is a truth to that. But it can't be that that's the only truth, and it can't be that we're that we're always going to find those connections. When we have to be able to handle these traditions, these stories, with that sense of skepticism that the Ibn Ezra offers, because it's with that skepticism that we're able to maintain our own insight, our own and make our own contributions to understanding what the Torah is telling us. I'm going to pause if there's any questions or thoughts or reactions to what we've just seen.
Well, one of the things I loved about the Rebbe is he always said, well, why does it have to be either this or that? Why can't it be both? So he always is looking for that unity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And That's why it's so exciting to study the same parsha year in and year out together, right? Is that we
That's
can
right.
take what seem to be opposite approaches to the same questions, and there is truth in both of them. So Arthur commented on the length of the source packet tonight. The final source is a very long passage from the Rambam, his famous Hakdama to Perek HaChelek, his introduction to the 10th chapter of Sanhedrin, where he gives his own theory, his own approach to Midrash. We're not going to look at the Rambam inside. I leave that to you as bonus reading. But the Rambam has very strong things to say about people that take some of the Midrashim too literally, and people who read the Midrashim with the skepticism that might not be healthy skepticism. So that's for anyone that wants to dive even deeper into this wonderful question about how we approach, how we read, how we deal with the Midrashic traditions that we have. I hope that this gives us what to think about, and we're going to be with the Mishkan for several weeks, so this can hopefully inform all of our reading of the upcoming Parshiot, and hopefully enrich our understanding and appreciation for what's going on. We're gonna end for tonight.
How can we read the article that you wrote in the Jewish Times after this year? Can you like put it on the WhatsApp page or something?
Yeah,
The link?
I can do that. I can, because once the Zoom stops, then the link won't be there.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the WhatsApp as well. Yes.
Thank you.
I particularly enjoyed your delivery, your spirit for this talk. I thought it was very special.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody, and look forward to seeing you over Shabbos.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
Atzei, Atzei,